Our Meet the Big 12 series continues. Now we invite in John Kurtz. He has hosted Kansas State football and basketball on radio from 2011 to 2021. Current play-by-play broadcaster for Big 12 Now on ESPN+. Welcome into the Sons of UCF, John.
Hey, what's up, guys? I appreciate you having me.
Thanks so much. Before we talk about Kansas State and get to know the program a little bit better, I want to get your reaction to the Wednesday news that the Big 12 has a new commissioner, one Brett Yormark. Your reaction?
Yeah, I'm ecstatic about it, honestly, because, I think what's pretty clear, and it was made pretty clear by Lawrence Chovanec, who was the head of the Big 12 Board of Directors who made this hire. I mean, college athletics looks so much different than it did, not even 10 to 20 years ago. How about 3 years ago, with everything that's happening with NIL, the transfer portal, Texas and Oklahoma leaving, and really the SEC and the Big Ten kind of pulling away from everybody. I think it's a completely different game than what it was 3, 5, 10, 20 years ago. And so you need a hire that reflects that. And when I started hearing, in fact, I heard it, and K-State Athletic Director Gene Taylor, I respect him a lot, really like him. And I think this is a pretty commonly held opinion in the Big 12, but there was a lot of talk about, hey, we need a veteran athletic director, somebody that's been in college athletics for a long time, more along the lines of a conventional hire. And I did not want that to happen when I started hearing that. I thought this needs to be outside of the box. This needs to be more in the vein of what the Pac-12 did with George Kliavkoff, who came from the MGM Grand in Vegas. Somebody that's going to have different innovative ideas and know how to manage this as it turns more and more into something that looks like professional sports. And obviously, I think that's what you have here with the background. Obviously, some major things that have happened. At one point in time, this guy orchestrated the biggest sponsorship deal in North American sports history with NASCAR, a $750 million deal with Nextel at the time to take over the Nextel Cup Series. He also orchestrated moving the Nets from New Jersey to Brooklyn, which was no small feat at all, and has now been working more on the entertainment side with Rock Nation. And let's be honest, the way this is going, you have a lot more athletes that have a brand and things like that to manage. And now this is somebody that's been able to do that. And even beyond that, he still has flirted with college athletics, has worked a little bit with college athletics at points in time. And the one concern that I've really heard about it is like, hey, culturally, how is this going to fit with the Big 12? This is kind of a guy wearing Armani suits, from New York. How's that? I saw even the quote in the Athletic article. How's that going to play in Manhattan, Kansas? Well, look, the guy worked with NASCAR. That doesn't exactly scream NASCAR, his whole vibe either. And he made it work really, really well for them. So for all those reasons, and just on top of that, I think the Big 12 being pretty aggressive and pretty progressive in what they did here with a hire, that goes against the grain in terms of what the reputation of the league has been. So I'm thrilled for it. I think this was exactly what the league needed to kind of lead them into a new frontier.
You used the phrase a cultural fit. How does a UCF fit into the cultural fit? What is the reaction from Kansas State fans to UCF, of course, BYU, Cincinnati, and Houston joining the Big 12?
Yeah, I think the plain reality of it was schools like K-State and, frankly, most of the 8 that were left in the Big 12 really didn't have a whole lot of choice other than to bring in the 4 best programs that you could. And I think that's pretty universally recognized that UCF is one of the 4 best programs that you could have added. So it's really like beggars can't be choosers. You needed somebody who was going to bring not only a brand in football, but TV brand, big fan base, large metro area. It just checks a ton of the boxes that you really needed out of what you were bringing. And, I've been pretty vocal on the record about I think UCF has more potential than anybody that's coming into the league because of how aggressive UCF has been. Young fan base, obviously, a lot of fundraising that's been going on. Such a young program that hasn't been around that long. The growth curve on UCF right now is insane. And if you start to sort of extrapolate that out of the future, it can go pretty darn high. So I love it. I think a lot of K-State fans are just in the feeling out process with it. I think, we're kind of getting to know UCF. And to be quite honest, a lot of what I know, I loved the claiming a national championship thing, very wholeheartedly supported that. And I think that gave you kind of a window into what the attitude is. But I've also been able to see, I'm a big guy on Twitter. I kind of love internet fan bases and internet rivalries and all that. And that's another thing I picked up on, that UCF's pretty good at the old Twitter game. So I'm excited for it. I think most K-State fans are too, really, about all 4 additions and just really making the conference more viable here moving forward.
John, let's get into some individual sports. We'll start with football since that typically rules the college landscape. Give us an assessment of where K-State football is at this point. Chris Klieman comes in, has 2 8-win seasons. There's some optimism this year. Adrian Martinez coming in, a quarterback from Nebraska. Where do you see this K-State football program at right now? What are realistic expectations from your perspective as you go into the next season?
Yeah, it feels like a real turning point. Bill Snyder obviously did great things, but things got really stale by the end of his tenure. Desperately needed a change, and thank goodness they got it before everything that happened in 2020. But Chris Kleiman's first season was no small feat. I mean, he inherited a pretty bleak roster. They didn't have a scholarship running back when he took over, and he wound up going 8-4 in the regular season, and they were a couple plays away from being a 9 or a 10-win team. There were some close losses in there. So it was a really impressive debut. Then 2020, they just got hit really hard by the pandemic. The COVID year could not have really gone worse for them. A lot of bad luck mixed with some poor decisions personnel-wise, and they have a 4-win season, and everybody, it's just all kind of in flux. Then last year was kind of like a, get back on stable footing. 7-5, probably should have been 8-4, dumb loss to Texas at the end of the year. But it led to Chris Klieman firing his offensive coordinator, who was a childhood friend of his. And I think that really started an evolution that you're seeing here, where he was willing to do that. He promoted Colin Klein, obviously former Heisman Trophy finalist at quarterback, to the offensive coordinator. And it's led to a real surge in recruiting. I mean, K-State's in the midst of putting together its best recruiting class probably in my lifetime. On July 5th, they're expected to get a commitment from an Elite 11 quarterback, Avery Johnson, who I think is going to be huge for them in the future. But you're seeing all this stuff happening off the field that's indicating, hey, things are really moving in the right direction here. And maybe this is a coach that can take the next step from being a 7 or 8-win program, which is what they've been ever since 2012 when they flirted with a national championship. And now I think when you put it together with what they have on the field this year, too, it fits that narrative, because the roster was ready to go this year minus quarterback. They lost Skylar Thompson, who got drafted by the Miami Dolphins. Looks like he's going to be the backup to Tua this year. They needed somebody at quarterback, and Adrian Martinez will be the key, because they've got All-Americans potentially in Deuce Vaughn at running back, who's one of the best players in college football that probably not enough people know about. Felix Anudike-Uzomah, one of the best pass rushers in the country and a potential first-round draft pick on defense. And then Cooper Beebe, an offensive lineman, I think is another potential All-American. They've got a really good starting 22, maybe some depth concerns there, but the thing you needed was a QB. And I think Adrian Martinez offers a lot of upside. He played with one of the worst offensive lines in maybe Power 5 history at Nebraska, was forced to play with a broken jaw, torn labrum last year, and obviously took a lot of heat for, look, a guy who didn't win many games, and I understand that. But I think you pair him with Deuce Vaughn, who can take a lot of pressure off of him, and you pair him with a better offensive line and, frankly, a better coaching staff. I think he's going to be in a much better position to succeed this year at K-State. And if he is, if he can resemble what his pedigree was coming out of high school, which was, 4-star, borderline 5-star quarterback, then you really have something. So the expectation of Manhattan is to take a step forward from being a 7 or 8-win team and being a team that can contend for the Big 12 championship, or at least a spot in Arlington to play for the Big 12 championship this year. And, frankly, with how wide open the league seems this year, with Oklahoma probably down a touch, I think it's reasonable to say they have an outside chance at the Big 12 championship this year. And when you pair that with recruiting that's on the upswing, the feeling around here is that this really is the time to take the next step as a program. Now, whether or not that happens remains to be seen, but there's a lot of optimism this year.
Off the field for a second, UCF and Kansas State played in 2010. We went out to Manhattan in a game that got deluged by some sort of a godly weather system.
Yes.
But for those who haven't been out there in a long time, what can fans expect if they make the trek to Manhattan, Kansas? Any traditions from a football perspective, tailgate scene, game day, pomp and circumstance? Give us kind of the highlights of what we can expect if we make the trek out there to Manhattan.
Yeah. That was an eventful day. I will not soon forget that. There's a wild picture out there of what the sky looked like at one point in time. And obviously the game got delayed because of that. I also remember, I think it was someone from the Orlando Sentinel who was coming for the game, went to, and look, frankly, I'm embarrassed by this, but the press box meal that day was lamb. It was like Lamb Day. And it got just crushed by some blogger from the Orlando, or in a blog from the beat writer from the Orlando Sentinel. I remember that too about that game. It was not the greatest reflection or look for Manhattan. But what you're going to find is just a total college town. It's a great college town. Now, I'm biased. I went to school there. I lived there for over a decade. before moving to Kansas City. But like it's a quintessential college town where everybody cares about K-State immensely. It's about 50,000 people, give or take, with the students. You know, you might be pushing closer to 60, but fairly small community that just loves K-State athletics. Football is king. There have been over $300 million pumped into facilities, most of which have gone to football in the last 10 years. So the stadium looks great. In fact, they're also building a new indoor practice facility right now as we speak, which is going to add to that. So there's been a lot that's been done to really get K-State up to speed and capitalize on the success of Bill Snyder there. As far as traditions go, I'm trying to think. You'll see the Wabash Cannonball students bouncing back and forth with one of the fight songs that's played. That's definitely one of the traditions. Man, I'm trying to think as far as, you know, I mean, it's just it's a great, I think it's a much louder football environment than what you'd expect. You know, K-State fans always have a chip on their shoulder. I think it's a fan base that kind of is chronically underrated, or just a program that's chronically underrated because it hasn't been the sexiest brand. Even when Bill Snyder was winning a lot of games his second time around, it was not the sexiest brand out there. But then basketball too, you know, I mean, if you come up for a basketball game, Ramos Coliseum, when the team is good and winning, it's an incredibly live environment. They're in the Frank Martin era when I was in college. That was really the draw over football. And it was about as loud as anywhere in the country. But it's much more fleeting in basketball, where that's going to be pretty dependent on what the team is like. So football is definitely still a driver there. And, you know, a lot of people will remember and harken back to at one point in time, it was the worst college football program in America before Bill Snyder took it over. So you will definitely hear a lot about the turnaround and just how it really saved K-State from maybe dropping down to, at the time, Division I AA, getting kicked out of the Big 8 conference. And Bill Snyder twice had K-State within an eyelash of a national championship. So very proud fan base about the football in particular in Manhattan.
Sounds like we have to stay away from the lamb. Is there any food, any delicacy folks should try when they're in Manhattan, Kansas, absent the lamb, of course?
Yeah, you know, I would definitely skip out on that. Yeah, you know, the two most popular places, Taco Lucha, So Long Saloon, they're right by each other. They're in Aggieville, so that is a tradition I should probably elaborate on there. Aggieville is the bar district, and I think you would be surprised again for a town of the size of Manhattan what this is. I mean, it's, you know, we're talking 3-4 blocks just full of bars and restaurants. That is a very cool area, very heavily populated by the students, definitely where you go party, but also where some of the best food is in Manhattan. If you want great street tacos, you definitely need to check out Taco Lucha. My personal favorite thing there, too, is called a Nancy. That is Old Milwaukee mixed with pineapple juice. They sell them for like $2.50. It started as a way for them to get rid of the Old Milwaukee, you know, because I wouldn't want to drink Old Milwaukee. You throw some pineapple juice in it, and all of a sudden it tastes great. So that's definitely one of the traditions, too, that I certainly love to tout when I get back there. And if you go to Taco Lucha, make sure you try the blackberry. I'm trying to think here. It's a raspberry bean dip. Raspberry bean dip is what it is. Sounds weird, but it is excellent. It's like cream cheese, black beans, and some kind of like raspberry sauce drizzled over the top of it. That's one of the most popular food items in Manhattan.
I wouldn't be a credible quasi-journalist if I didn't ask, why is it called the Nancy?
I actually don't know. That's a very good question. I would imagine it's because, like, hey, man, you can't take a full beer like a real man. You got to throw some pineapple juice in it or something. But I don't actually know that 100% for sure. And now I'm going to ask the next time that I'm there.
What's the craft beer scene? What's the craft beer scene like?
It's better now because there are two places you'd want to go for that. One is Tallgrass Tap House. There used to be a microbrewery in town, Tallgrass, that actually got pretty successful regionally, and I think you can actually still find some of it, but it's not as big as it once was. They shut down like the main facility of it, so you can't get it as much anymore, but they used to pump out some really good stuff. 8-Bit is a really good one if you can find it. That's an IPA, or 16-Bit, a double IPA if you're into that. But Tallgrass Tap House will still serve some of that. It's a restaurant that still keeps some of the same beers, and they'll rotate in beers. And then literally right down the street is Manhattan Brewing Company, which is pretty new. It was started by a group of guys, including one former K-State football player. And that's kind of the new, more popular, trendy place to go, I would say now, especially for a slightly younger crowd, where you can get a bunch of Really good beers. Not as much the food, just some bar snacks, but a lot of really good beer. And both of those places are within probably half a block of each other, and that's on Points, which is another area, kind of like a mini Aggieville, but a little more geared for an older crowd as opposed to the students.
As we wrap up, what are the other sports that UCF fans should be paying attention to that Kansas State has been good at?
Yeah, women's basketball has had a decent amount of success. Ayoka Lee had a 62-point game last year against Oklahoma, which I believe I'm gonna feel real bad for messing this up, but it set the NCAA record, I believe, for points in a game last year, which was crazy. She's one of the best players in America, and a pretty high NILer too, in this new world of NIL. Baseball, they've pumped a lot of resources into here lately. They have a really nice new baseball facility. I did play-by-play for K-State baseball for about 7 years. But they won a Big 12 championship in 2013. It's been a struggle since then. They've been pretty up and down. Volleyball has had its moments, some really big moments. And they've had, Leah Carter is one of the best players in the country here over the last couple of years, and they've made some tournaments. Equestrian was a big thing for a while. Then they quit it as a sport and brought in women's soccer instead. It's been kind of a struggle starting to try and get that up and going. So, the rest of the sports scene is pretty hit or miss right now at K-State, to be completely honest. And I apologize if I'm leaving anybody out. I'm racking my brain here, but that's kind of a general scope of the scene with everything else there. K-State has the minimum of sports that you have to hit right now across the board. So it's not a bloated athletic department when it comes to having a bunch of different Olympic and non-revenue sports.
You're a good follow on Twitter. Talk to folks about where they can find your work and all of the different things you're involved with.
Yeah, so it's at JL Kurtz. You can see it there on the screen. But yeah, I'm on Twitter way too much, so you'll get plenty of me if you follow me on Twitter there. But YouTube is where I have my biggest following, and it's all Big 12 focused content. I go live on Wednesdays and Sundays, and then sprinkle in a little bit of extra content throughout the week. And we've got a really good community, over 12,000 now that are following on there. So that's been really fun. And it's been cool. We do have some UCF fans that pop in there as well. And it's been fun getting to know Houston, BYU, Cincinnati, and some of those fans that have come into that world as well. So it's a really good community if you want to kind of experience what's going on in the Big 12 right now and some of the camaraderie with the new league. You can also catch me every now and then on Big 12 Now, ESPN Plus, still as a play-by-play broadcaster. That was my first love and why I got into broadcasting. Do some fill-in work for K-State, and then with the conference, particularly the track and field championships, you can catch me there. And also, if you're into K-State specific content, I know this may not be totally the audience for that, but on Kansas City Sports Network, I do a weekly podcast called Three Ma, with a couple guys, Derek Young and Cole Manbeck, just zeroing in totally on K-State sports there.
John Kurtz, we appreciate you stopping by Sons of UCF to give us a little insight on Kansas State. Get ready for that UCF Twitter mafia.
I'm ready, man. Bring it on. I like it. I'm all about some back and forth on Twitter there. You know what? Frankly, I'm excited for UCF to just unleash some Big 12 fury on everybody else. So if you guys could carry that banner, I'd appreciate it.
All right, John. Thanks so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.